The Caleb family's new house lay nestled in the suburbs of New York, a place known for its quiet, clean, and secure neighborhoods. Lisa stood by the living room window, gazing absent-mindedly out at the front yard. She couldn't help but wonder if moving from the bustling city to this quieter place was the right choice. A fresh start. David had reminded her of that again and again. Caleb will get to live in a healthier environment, have friendly neighbors, and the chance to develop better, he'd insisted. Though Lisa acknowledged these convincing reasons, a hidden worry still gnawed at her heart. Caleb, her 10-year-old son, had been born with cerebral palsy. The condition made it difficult for him to control his muscles and maintain balance. Since he was little, he'd had to rely on a wheelchair and other assistance to move around, even for the simplest of tasks. "Caleb, are you okay?" Lisa softly asked, kneeling beside his wheelchair. Caleb looked up at her, his dark eyes sparkling with the innocent joy of a child. "I'm fine, Mom. This house is so big I can play ball with you in the yard, can't I?" he asked eagerly, pointing toward the front lawn. Lisa smiled, holding back the sadness that rose in her as she thought about how much Caleb longed for freedom, while cerebral palsy remained his biggest obstacle. She nodded and gently stroked his hair. "Of course, sweetheart. We can play whenever you want." David approached from behind, placing a comforting hand on Lisa's shoulder. "You know, Caleb is going to be all right. I met someone from a childcare agency last week. This caregiver has special experience with children who need extra support, like Caleb. I think it'll help take some of the pressure off you and make it easier for Caleb to adjust to this new place." Lisa looked at David, surprised and slightly concerned, trying not to show her misgivings in front of Caleb. She glanced at David with a serious expression. "You made this decision without discussing it with me." David looked momentarily flustered but held his ground. "I just wanted to help. You know, taking care of Caleb takes up nearly all your time, and I thought you could use a little more space for yourself, too. And a caregiver might be able to give Caleb the kind of support you're hoping for." Lisa sighed, not wanting to argue further. She turned to look at Caleb, who was smiling brightly as he took in their new house. A sense of unease crept into her heart. She wasn't entirely opposed to the idea of hiring a caregiver, but as his mother, Lisa knew better than anyone that she had to be very cautious about who she trusted to look after Caleb. A few days later, the doorbell rang, and when Lisa opened the door, she saw a middle-aged woman standing there. She had neatly combed hair, a calm face, and a gentle, welcoming smile. The woman extended her hand, her voice both polite and warm. "Hello, I'm Esther, from the agency Mr. David contacted," she introduced herself. Lisa shook Esther's hand, holding back the lingering doubt within her. She invited Esther into the house, where David and Caleb were waiting in the living room. Caleb, with his wide eyes and innocent curiosity, looked at Esther with a mixture of interest and excitement. Esther quickly captured his attention by sitting down to his level and asking him about his favorite things. Observing the natural way the woman interacted with Caleb, calm and friendly, Lisa felt herself relax just a bit. "Caleb, do you like superheroes?" Esther asked gently, noticing the superhero stickers on his wheelchair. Caleb nodded, his eyes lighting up. "Yes, I love Spider-Man and Batman too. They're so strong and never give up." Esther smiled, responding warmly. "Oh, really? Then let's work together so you can be strong like them too, all right?" Standing nearby, Lisa felt her heart ease slightly. Maybe Esther did have the skills to work with special needs children, just as the agency had described. Perhaps hiring a caregiver wasn't such a bad decision after all. But as Esther discussed schedules and care methods with David, Lisa couldn't shake off a lingering unease. She wondered if this woman was truly someone their family could trust. For a brief moment, Esther's eyes sharpened, but she quickly returned to her usual gentle smile before Lisa could fully grasp the change. Lisa reassured herself that she was probably just overthinking things. That entire afternoon, Esther was thoroughly professional, showing a clear understanding of Caleb's unique needs. She shared her experience working with children with disabilities, detailing psychological approaches and promising to always be careful and attentive in every situation. Though somewhat impressed by Esther, Lisa still couldn't entirely set aside her intuition. On one hand, she knew hiring Esther could ease some of the family stress, but on the other, her motherly instinct urged her to remain cautious. If Lisa's story has moved you, Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on the next chapters of her journey as she fights for Caleb's safety and happiness. Help us spread the message so that more people understand and take action for children's rights. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support Lisa and Caleb. The journey is far from over. Join us in following every step. The first morning after Esther started, Lisa woke up earlier than usual. She quietly descended the stairs and paused outside Caleb's room. Through the slightly open door, she saw Esther sitting beside him, helping him hold a spoon to eat his breakfast. The way she spoke to him, encouraging him to try eating on his own, brought Lisa a sense of relief. It seemed Esther truly had the skill and experience to care for a special needs child. "You're doing so well, Caleb. Just a little more patience and you'll get the hang of it," Esther said, smiling tenderly, as if she genuinely cared for him. Caleb smiled back, nodding with a look full of trust. Seeing this, Lisa felt a small weight lift off her heart. Maybe David was right, she thought. Sometimes she needed to let go of her own worries and fears, allowing Caleb the chance to become more independent and to grow in his own way. However, over the following days, Lisa began noticing a few unsettling signs. Once, as she happened to walk past the living room, she saw Esther guiding Caleb through some light physical therapy exercises. Suddenly, Lisa heard an unfamiliar tone in Esther's voice, cold and firm, a stark contrast to her earlier gentle demeanor. "Hold your arm straight up," Esther commanded, her voice low and stern. Caleb tried to keep his arm up, but his trembling hands couldn't hold it steady for more than a few seconds. Esther glanced at him with a look of disapproval, and Lisa caught the worried expression in her son's eyes. Before Lisa could say anything, Esther turned back to her usual calm, smiling self, as if nothing unusual had happened. "It's all right, Caleb. We'll try again later. Just a little each day," she said gently, though something in her voice felt cold to Lisa, an inexplicable chill that lingered. Lisa stood in silence, a growing unease building inside her. She wondered if she was reading too much into the situation, but the image of Esther's stern gaze at Caleb lingered in her mind. In the days that followed, Lisa noticed Caleb growing quieter. Her usually cheerful son, who always had something to share with her, now fell silent whenever she asked about his day or what he'd done with Esther. When she asked, Caleb would give brief answers or seem uneasy. One day, when she asked him about his exercises with Esther, he simply looked down and murmured, "Miss Esther says I need to do better. I tried, but I couldn't, Mom." Lisa gently hugged Caleb, sensing he was holding back tears. A deep unease welled up in her. She felt it wasn't just a matter of physical challenges. Caleb seemed to be losing his joy and confidence. One evening, Lisa decided to talk to David about her observations. "I think something isn't right, David," she said, her voice heavy with worry. "Caleb hasn't been himself. Every time I ask about Esther, he seems nervous and unsettled. I feel like she might be too hard on him." David listened, but he remained calm. "Lisa, maybe you're worrying too much. Esther is a professional. She knows how to work with special needs kids, and a bit of discipline is important. Caleb needs to learn to overcome his challenges, and he won't always have you around." Lisa didn't argue further, but she couldn't shake her concerns. She knew there was a fine line between encouraging growth and enforcing control, and as a mother, she felt something wasn't right. One afternoon, when Lisa came home earlier than expected, she entered the house and overheard Esther speaking harshly to Caleb. "You need to learn to do things on your own, understand? A weak child will never succeed in life." Esther's voice was cold and sharp, sending a chill down Lisa's spine as she stood in the hallway, frozen in shock. Lisa stood frozen, a wave of anger and unease surging through her. She couldn't believe that the caregiver she once thought trustworthy would speak to Caleb in such a way. Hurriedly entering the room, Lisa watched as Esther's expression quickly softened, her face breaking into a gentle smile as if nothing had happened. "Oh, Lisa. You're home early," Esther said sweetly, her voice laced with false warmth. Lisa nodded, saying nothing, but her gaze betrayed her suspicion. Caleb sat in his wheelchair, head bowed, hands clenched together, his shoulders trembling. Esther swiftly shifted topics, enthusiastically recounting Caleb's achievements during today's session, but Lisa didn't hear a word. Her mind was consumed by the image of Caleb. He seemed to be retreating, growing more fearful, as though weighed down by an invisible pressure that Esther was working hard to conceal. After that afternoon, Lisa resolved to keep a closer eye on Esther's actions. She began to observe Caleb's behavior carefully, noting every subtle change, from his cautious glances to his unusual silence whenever Esther was around. Lisa's worries no longer felt baseless. She knew she had to do something to protect Caleb, even if it meant confronting the caregiver David so wholeheartedly trusted. The next morning, after Caleb had left for physical therapy with his father, Lisa decided to trust her instincts and take action. She knew that to uncover the truth, she needed real evidence of how Esther treated Caleb when neither she nor David was present. Lisa went out and bought several small security cameras, the kind that could be discreetly hidden without attracting attention. Back at home, she quietly placed them in areas where Esther typically worked, with Caleb: the living room, Caleb's bedroom, and the kitchen. This way, she hoped to observe Esther's interactions and see if her suspicions were justified. Before beginning her surveillance, Lisa sat alone in her study, gripping her hands tightly. Part of her felt guilty for not fully trusting the caregiver David had chosen, but her maternal instincts were stronger. If something's wrong, I have to know, she told herself. In the days that followed, Lisa discreetly monitored the footage on her phone whenever she had a moment. At first, the camera showed Esther behaving appropriately. She helped Caleb with his physical therapy exercises and spoke to him in a friendly manner. Yet Lisa noticed fleeting moments when Esther's gaze turned cold and irritated each time Caleb struggled. Then, one day, while watching the feed on her phone, Lisa saw Esther ordering Caleb to stand up from his wheelchair without any assistance. Though Caleb tried his best, his legs couldn't support him, and he collapsed onto the floor. Instead of helping, Esther stood there, arms crossed, looking down at him with a look of contempt. "Get up on your own, Caleb. What do you think you'll ever achieve in life if you can't even stand up by yourself?" Esther's voice was icy, pushing Caleb into a state of anxiety and shame. Caleb struggled, trying to pull himself up by gripping his wheelchair, his eyes darting around in panic as if he were hoping for someone to rescue him. Lisa felt her heart clench as she watched. She nearly wanted to call Esther immediately, but she knew doing so would compromise her plan to gather evidence. One evening, while helping Caleb with his bath, Lisa noticed new bruises on his arms and knees. When she asked about them, Caleb lowered his head and muttered that he didn't mean to fall. His sad eyes made Lisa's heart ache. Deep down, she knew these bruises weren't accidental. "Sweetheart, if anything is happening, you can always tell me. I'm here to help you." "All right," Lisa said gently, trying to encourage him. Caleb glanced at her briefly, his eyes filled with fear, then nodded quietly. Even so, Lisa sensed a barrier between them that hadn't been there before. Caleb seemed to be hiding something. Over the next few days, Lisa noticed Caleb growing more withdrawn and quiet. He no longer showed excitement for their afternoon games in the backyard. He even asked to be left alone in his room, something he rarely did before. One night, while reading to Caleb, Lisa noticed him repeatedly avoiding her gaze. His eyes held worry and unease as he bit his lip, his hands clenched tightly. When she paused to ask him about it, Caleb looked at her with a pleading expression, then silently turned away. "Mom, if I don't do well, will Miss Esther be angry?" Caleb asked softly, his voice trembling. Lisa took a deep breath, sensing the anxiety in her son's words. "Sweetheart, no one has the right to make you feel scared. You don't need to worry about that. I'll always be here to protect you, okay?" Lisa's answer made Caleb nod slightly, but his eyes remained filled with fear. She couldn't stand it any longer. She decided she would confront Esther about her suspicions and the troubling behavior she'd observed. The next day, with Caleb playing in his room, Lisa invited Esther to sit down in the living room to talk. The atmosphere was tense and stifling. Lisa sat facing Esther, her heart filled with a mixture of worry and rising anger. "Esther, I want to discuss how you've been treating Caleb," Lisa began, her voice firm but controlled. Esther smiled, though her eyes betrayed no warmth. "Lisa, I understand that you're concerned for Caleb, but sometimes excessive protection can make a child weak and dependent. The exercises I've been using are scientifically proven methods that work well with children who have disabilities." Lisa shook her head, unable to contain her emotions. "I don't believe that making a child endure fear and pressure is a scientific method. Caleb is becoming more withdrawn and anxious. That's not the behavior of a happy child. Such incompetence. You can't get anything right, can you? How do you expect to grow up and take care of yourself like this?" Esther's voice was cold and sharp. Caleb sat there in silence, not daring to look up, visibly trembling with fear. Lisa could see his small shoulders hunching as if he were trying to make himself smaller, to escape Esther's intimidating gaze. He lowered his head, giving a slight nod, but he said nothing. Esther didn't stop there. She forced Caleb to mop up the spilled water with the damp cloth without giving him a fresh one. Caleb fumbled, trying to clean the floor, but only made things worse. Esther stood by with her arms crossed, watching him struggle, her expression devoid of empathy. Sitting in her chair, Lisa felt as if the world were crumbling around her. She couldn't believe that this woman could treat Caleb so cruelly. Her sweet, innocent child was now burdened with a pressure he didn't deserve. That evening, when David came home, Lisa decided to confront him. She needed him to understand that things were far more serious than they'd thought. She played the video, showing him exactly what had happened. David watched in silence, his expression gradually shifting as he saw Esther's cold stare and the fear in Caleb's eyes. But when the video ended, he simply shook his head, saying nothing at first. Finally, he sighed and turned to Lisa. "Lisa, I know you're worried about Caleb, but you need to look at this realistically. Sometimes, a bit of discipline is necessary to help Caleb mature. I think you're being overly sensitive." Lisa couldn't believe her ears. She felt helpless as she watched David refuse to acknowledge the real issue. "David, this isn't discipline. This is abuse. Our son is being threatened and hurt." David held firm, trying to convince Lisa that a caregiver being strict with a disabled child could be normal. He argued that Lisa was overreacting and overprotecting Caleb, but Lisa didn't back down. She knew she had seen the truth, and regardless of whether David believed her or not, she would not allow her son to suffer any longer. That night, Lisa lay awake, replaying every moment of Esther's behavior and Caleb's silence in her mind. She knew she couldn't just sit by and watch any longer. She needed to take concrete action to protect Caleb. The next morning, after David left for work, Lisa called a private investigator agency she had heard about from a friend. She wanted to learn more about Esther's background and uncover any possible reasons for her behavior. When the call ended, Lisa looked around her home in silence. This was supposed to be a safe, happy place for Caleb. But now, it had become a place where fear lurked quietly, robbing her heart of any peace. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for Caleb's sake, she was ready to do whatever it took to reveal Esther's true nature. 2 days later, Lisa met with James Turner, a seasoned private investigator with years of experience in cases involving domestic abuse and child mistreatment. She sought his help with a mix of hope and dread, hoping her fears were merely exaggerated but prepared to face whatever truths might be revealed. James listened intently as Lisa recounted Esther's abusive behavior captured on camera and the psychological changes Caleb had been experiencing since her arrival. "Mrs. Lisa," James said in a calm voice, "I'll investigate Esther's background. If she's worked with any families before or has a questionable history, I'll uncover it. But I'll also need you to be patient if we want to make sure her actions are brought to light. All evidence must be rock solid and indisputable." Lisa nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. "I just want to make sure my son is safe." "Thank you, James." While waiting for James's findings, Lisa continued monitoring Esther via the cameras. She knew every moment Esther was near Caleb posed a potential risk, and though she wanted to act immediately, she understood the need for patience and solid evidence. One afternoon, as Lisa reviewed the latest footage from Caleb's room, she watched Esther force him to stand up from his wheelchair without support, demanding that he keep his balance. Caleb was visibly terrified, and his body began to tremble. When he fell, instead of helping him, Esther simply stood there, looking at him coldly. Lisa's heart broke watching Caleb struggle in vain to get up. She knew this wasn't the first time Esther had behaved this way. These actions weren't only causing Caleb physical pain, but were also breaking his spirit, instilling fear, and eroding his trust in those around him. Over time, Lisa noticed Esther becoming more cautious. It seemed Esther sensed Lisa's suspicions, and this made her subtly adjust her approach to Caleb. One day, when Lisa returned home early, she found Esther and Caleb in the living room, seemingly having a friendly conversation. Caleb sat quietly, his gaze lowered, while Esther whispered something Lisa couldn't hear. As she entered the room, she caught a glimpse of a cold, sharp look in Esther's eyes before she turned back with her usual gentle smile. "Hello, Lisa. Caleb and I had a very productive lesson today," Esther said cheerfully, though Lisa noticed a distinct lack of warmth in her eyes. Lisa nodded but couldn't suppress her lingering doubts. She sensed clearly that Esther was hiding something, which only strengthened her resolve to dig deeper into this woman's background. A week later, James Turner called Lisa. His voice was thoughtful, as if carefully weighing his words before he spoke. Lisa, I found some information about Esther. Before working for your family, she was a nanny for 3 other families over the past 2 years, all of which had children requiring special care. Lisa held her breath, listening closely to every word. She felt she was inching closer to the truth, a truth that might frighten her but one she needed to know. 2 of those families moved away, suddenly James continued. Both refused to share details when I contacted them. As for the remaining family, there were some issues. The mother mentioned that their son, a boy with autism, underwent a drastic change in behavior after Esther left. He became fearful, anxious, and withdrawn around strangers. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Esther directly to the boy's condition. Lisa's anxiety grew. What James had uncovered showed her that Esther was far more complicated than she appeared. There was something dark in her past, something that had driven other families to leave and left lasting scars on the children in her care. That night, as Lisa sat with Caleb before bedtime, she noticed he seemed uneasy. His eyes were downcast and his hands were clenched together tightly. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Caleb, Lisa asked gently, trying to create a safe space for him. Caleb was silent for a moment, then spoke in a small voice. "Mom, Miss Esther says that if I don't do well, you'll be disappointed in me. She says you won't want to play with me anymore." Lisa felt a pang of pain in her heart. Esther had been manipulating Caleb emotionally, making him fearful that if he didn't perform well, his mother would turn away from him. For a child like Caleb, the fear of losing his mother's love was a deep psychological wound. Lisa hugged Caleb tightly, silently promising herself that she wouldn't let this woman hurt her son any longer. The next morning, after David had left for work, Lisa called James to inform him of the latest development with Caleb. She emphasized that this wasn't just physical abuse. Esther was using subtle psychological manipulation to control Caleb. James agreed to dig deeper and would try to contact one of the families Esther had previously worked with. Before ending the call, James spoke gravely. "Lisa, if things worsen, we might need to file an official report with the police and Child Protective Services. I advise you to be prepared for that possibility." Lisa nodded, feeling a swell of worry and dread. She knew that to protect Caleb, she couldn't wait any longer. She was determined to gather enough evidence to confront Esther and bring everything to light. One afternoon, as Lisa reviewed the latest footage from Caleb's room, she saw Esther working with him on his physical therapy exercises. At first, everything appeared normal until Caleb accidentally spilled water from his drinking glass onto the floor. Esther turned to Caleb, her gaze icy. "Spilled water again. You're completely useless," she said, her voice quiet but sharp as a knife. Caleb looked up, pressing his lips together, clearly struggling to hold back tears. Esther moved closer and forced him to bend down to clean the floor, not with a clean cloth, but with his bare hands. Lisa could see Caleb's small hands trembling as he picked up each dirty piece of paper towel on the floor. Watching this scene, Lisa felt a surge of anger and helplessness. These images went beyond physical abuse. It was psychological torture, eroding Caleb's self-esteem and sense of self-worth. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. Just as Lisa was wrestling with what to do next, her phone rang. On the other end was James Turner, sounding more urgent than usual. "Lisa, I've uncovered some disturbing details," James said, his tone steady but laced with tension. "Esther has a troubling past. She was previously accused of abusing another young boy while working as a nanny, but due to lack of evidence, the case didn't go anywhere. That family eventually moved away to get away from her." Lisa's heart pounded. What she had long suspected was now confirmed. She knew she had to act quickly to protect Caleb from Esther. "James, what do you think we should do next?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice calm. James paused before replying. "Continue to monitor her closely and gather all the evidence you can. If necessary, we can involve the police in an official investigation. I'll keep contacting families who previously hired Esther to gather more information." That night, Lisa noticed that Caleb seemed to be suffering from insomnia. He kept waking up in the middle of the night, crying silently, too afraid to call for her. Once, when she entered his room, she found him curled up on the bed, staring at the window as though he were trying to escape from an invisible fear. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "You can tell me anything," Lisa said gently, sitting beside him and taking his hand. Caleb looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed, and whispered, "Miss Esther says." If I tell you, you'll be mad at me. She said you won't love me anymore. Hearing this, Lisa felt her heart shatter. Esther had been using subtle threats to manipulate Caleb, making him too afraid to share anything for fear of losing his mother's love. It was a cruel form of psychological control that Lisa could not accept. Lisa knew she couldn't allow this to continue. Caleb was not only enduring physical mistreatment but also an intense psychological burden. She kissed his forehead gently, silently promising him that things would change. The next morning, Lisa decided to confront Esther directly. She needed to resolve this immediately, and this time she wouldn't hold back her feelings. She had waited long enough and gathered enough evidence to expose this nanny's true nature. When Esther arrived, Lisa invited her to sit in the living room. The seriousness in Lisa's voice and gaze caused a flicker of uncertainty in Esther's expression. "Esther, I want to discuss how you've been taking care of Caleb," Lisa began, her tone calm but firm. Esther smirked slightly, as if she knew where this conversation was headed. "I'm doing everything for Caleb's benefit, Lisa. He needs to learn independence, and sometimes a little strictness is necessary." Lisa narrowed her eyes, looking directly at Esther. "A little strictness doesn't mean abuse. I've seen how you force my son to do things he physically can't, how you make him feel scared and lose confidence in himself." Esther was silent for a moment, her expression shifting from surprise to defiance. "Lisa, I think you should think carefully before making any rash decisions. Caleb needs someone like me, someone firm, who knows how to educate properly." Lisa felt a surge of anger but kept her composure. "You might be able to deceive others, but you can't fool me. I won't let you keep hurting my son." Esther stood up, stepping closer to Lisa, her gaze so cold it made Lisa take a step back. "You'll regret this. Sometimes kids like Caleb need someone who knows how to manage them, not a weak mother." As Esther left the house, Lisa knew this wouldn't end easily. Esther's true colors had shown, and Lisa realized that this woman wouldn't give up without a fight. But for her, nothing was more important than Caleb's safety. No matter the struggle, she was ready to face it head-on. She called James again, relaying the confrontation and requesting that he move forward with filing a report with the police and child protective services. With the evidence she had gathered, Lisa knew she had a strong case to bring Esther to justice. That night, Lisa sat beside Caleb's bed, watching him sleep peacefully. She knew her son had a long road to recovery ahead, but she was determined to do whatever it took to protect him from anyone who intended him harm. The next morning, Lisa and Detective James Turner met at the police station to formally file the report. Throughout the previous night, Lisa had tried to stay calm and mentally prepared for what was to come, though she couldn't entirely shake her anxiety. She had carefully organized all the video footage and documents that provided proof of Esther's subtle yet insidious abuse toward Caleb. When they entered the meeting room, Officer Patrick, a seasoned investigator, greeted them with a serious expression. James provided a summary of the case, highlighting the evidence Lisa had gathered and the troubling details of Esther's past. "We have clear evidence of both psychological and physical abuse inflicted by Esther on this child," James stated, his tone calm but resolute. "We hope you will investigate immediately and take steps to prevent her from causing further harm." Officer Patrick reviewed the documents and video footage, nodding before saying, "We'll open an official investigation into this case. If the evidence Mrs. Lisa has provided holds, we'll bring Esther to justice." Lisa felt a wave of relief wash over her. After everything, the truth she had shouldered alone for so long was finally coming to light. As word of the investigation spread, Esther quickly learned that Lisa had reported her to the police. She realized that Lisa's evidence could not only damage her reputation but could also lead to serious legal consequences. One morning, while Lisa was taking Caleb to his physical therapy session, her phone rang. She answered to hear Esther's voice, cold and full of menace. "Mrs. Lisa, I know what you did," Esther said, her tone low but each word clear. "If you think you can ruin my career that easily, you're mistaken. I won't let this go." Lisa took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Esther, I'm only doing what's necessary to protect my son. Your actions crossed a line, and I won't stop." Esther scoffed. "I've worked with many families. Do you really think I'm so easily defeated? Sometimes children like Caleb need someone who can handle them with a firm hand. Perhaps you're just too weak to see that." Lisa's anger simmered, though she kept her voice steady. "Esther, I won't let anyone harm Caleb again. The investigation has already begun, and I won't be silenced." Esther hung up. But Lisa knew that this woman wouldn't back down easily. Later that afternoon, when Lisa picked Caleb up from the therapy center, she gently informed him that Esther would no longer be working with them. Caleb stayed quiet, his gaze distant as he tried to process the news. "Mom, is MS. Esther a bad person?" Caleb asked, his voice trembling. Lisa knelt down, taking his hand gently. "Sweetheart, MS. Esther didn't treat you the way you deserve. I'm doing all of this to protect you so you can live in a safe and loving environment." Caleb looked up at his mother, his eyes filled with worry but also a clear trust in her. Lisa hugged him tightly, feeling reassured that her decision was the right one, and she knew her duty was to protect Caleb from any possible harm. A week after the case was under police investigation, Lisa began receiving calls from the media. Esther, in an attempt to retaliate and preserve her image, had reached out to several media outlets, painting Lisa as an overly strict mother unwilling to let her son undergo necessary training to become more independent. Some articles took Esther's side, criticizing Lisa for supposedly overreacting and claiming that strict discipline was essential for children with special needs. Lisa felt anger and helplessness watching her image distorted and the truth turned upside down. She decided to contact James and the police, providing them with additional evidence. She requested that the police hold a press conference to publicly release the evidence she had gathered, countering Esther's false accusations. Finally, the police organized a press conference to reveal the details of the investigation, with Lisa in attendance. During the conference, Lisa shared clear video footage of Esther's behavior, showing her forcing Caleb to attempt tasks beyond his ability and making degrading remarks to him. Lisa explained that her sole motivation in reporting this case was to protect her son and prevent other children from suffering similar harm. She emphasized that the evidence was undeniable. As the videos were shown, there was no denying the truth. Journalists present began to see that Lisa was simply a mother doing everything in her power to protect her child. Following the press conference, Esther's credibility plummeted. Families she had previously worked with started coming forward to the police, sharing additional details about her abusive behavior in the past. After the conference, Lisa returned home with Caleb. She sat beside him, holding him close. Finally, she could breathe a sigh of relief, knowing her son was now safe from harm. "It's all over, sweetheart? I'll always be here to protect you," Lisa whispered, her eyes filled with tears of relief and happiness. Caleb looked up at her, his eyes shining with absolute trust. "I know you'll always protect me." "Thank you, Mom." A few days after the press conference and official investigation, Lisa felt a massive weight lift from her shoulders. Esther had been summoned by the police, and other families were coming forward, exposing the cruelty they had endured while hiring her as a nanny. Esther's media image shifted from a trustworthy caregiver to a woman with a history of child abuse. However, for Lisa, the journey wasn't truly over. The months of enduring Esther's abuse had left deep scars on Caleb's psyche, and she knew her son needed time to heal. One morning, as they sat together in the living room, Lisa held Caleb's hand, looking into his deep, dark eyes. "Sweetheart, I'm here for you. I'll do whatever it takes to help you feel safe and happy again," she whispered, her eyes warm with love. Caleb nodded slightly, but traces of fear still lingered in his gaze. The trauma Esther had left in his mind wasn't something that would disappear easily. After consulting a child psychologist, Lisa decided to arrange therapy sessions for Caleb. Dr. Hannah Lee, an experienced psychologist specializing in children who had been through trauma, agreed to work with him. In their first session, Dr. Hannah gently spoke with Caleb, encouraging him to share his feelings. Lisa sat by his side, holding his hand tightly, at times quietly wiping away tears as she listened to her son describe his fears and the times he endured Esther's harshness. Dr. Hannah listened attentively, occasionally prompting Caleb to express his emotions further. "Caleb, you're a very strong boy. The fact that you've made it through all this and can talk about it with your mom is something to be very proud of." Caleb looked at Dr. Hannah with a hint of surprise, but then he gave a small smile. It was the first real smile Lisa had seen in weeks, a smile that showed Caleb was beginning to feel safe and loved again. Over the following weeks, Lisa and Caleb's home life gradually regained its sense of peace. David, realizing he had been wrong to trust Esther, began spending more time caring for Caleb and made efforts to make it up to Lisa, understanding how much she had endured alone. One evening, as the family sat together, David spoke up unexpectedly, his voice filled with emotion. Lisa, I'm sorry for not supporting you from the beginning. I didn't understand what you and Caleb were going through. Lisa smiled gently, placing her hand on his shoulder. What matters is that we're all here now, doing our best to give Caleb the best life possible. Caleb looked at his parents, his eyes shining as he felt the love and protection his family had for him. Through the police investigation, Lisa connected with several families who had also suffered at Esther's hands. The gatherings with these other parents became a space for them to share experiences, emotions, and to support each other in helping their children heal. At one gathering, a mother named Sophia, whose son had also been abused by Esther, said to Lisa, "I don't know how to thank you enough. Without your courage to speak up, we might still be living in silence and fear." Lisa smiled, feeling warmth in her heart as she realized her actions had helped not only Caleb but also many other children. She felt she wasn't alone in this journey, and that there were many parents willing to fight for their children. As other families learned about Lisa's brave actions, a small movement began to take shape. They petitioned authorities to reevaluate the oversight of nannies, especially those working with children who have special needs. Lisa became one of the pioneers of this movement. She attended numerous seminars and spoke up for children's rights and the need for a stricter vetting system for nannies. She hoped that by doing so, situations like Caleb's would never happen again. At one seminar, Lisa stood before a packed audience of parents, social workers, and media representatives. She spoke powerfully about her family's ordeal, the pain they had endured, and how a careful nanny oversight system could better protect children. As a mother, I know that nothing is more important than the safety and happiness of our children. We, as parents, have the right to demand a better protective system to keep those who intend harm out of positions they do not deserve, Lisa said, her voice trembling but full of resolve. Her words resonated deeply with many in the audience. And after that seminar, Lisa's movement gained more attention from the community and child protection organizations. After months of tireless advocacy and action, Lisa finally found a sense of peace for her family. Caleb gradually regained his confidence and joy, and her family had overcome the pain of the past to look toward the future. One afternoon, as the family sat together in the garden, Lisa watched Caleb playing with a bright smile on his face, her heart overflowing with happiness. She knew that, although this journey had been full of hardships and challenges, a mother's love had overcome every obstacle to protect her child. Lisa quietly whispered to herself, "I'll always be here, Caleb. No one will ever hurt you again." We can't always be by our children's side, but we can help create a safer world for them. If Caleb's story touched your heart, please join us in spreading this message. Let's call for stricter standards and better oversight for those working with children, especially those with special needs. Please join us. You can support by sharing this video, signing petitions, or learning more about children's rights in your community. Together, we can make a difference. Let's ensure that every child grows up in safety, love, and respect. Thank you for joining us on this journey.